How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne and this is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. This is a huge video today. We've got 4 news topics to cover. The first one is that the PS5 Pro's design has leaked. Don't let the rage baiters get to you on this one. I'm going to explain the biggest caveat that seems to be out there with this thing. The second news story I have to cover is that there's a PS5 scam going around and it's honestly a little bit believable, so I'm going to tell you how to avoid it. Third on the list, we now have another game developer confirming that the Xbox Series S is holding the PS5 back. And finally, there's some new news about the showcase and it's disappointing. When will Sony learn? All right, let's jump into this first news story here because the PS5 Pro's design has leaked, and if you see it, it looks like the PS5 Slim, which is not even surprising at all because if you go back to the last generation and look at the PS4 Slim and compare it to the PS5 Pro, they look very similar. The big key difference between the Slim and the Pro is that the Pro is bigger and it has 3 layers instead of 2, which is crazy, right? Like they need 3 layers to add in all of that extra massive gaming power that you got with the PS4 Pro. And the PS5 Pro, it's the exact same situation. It looks almost identical to the PS5 Slim. We don't know how much bigger it's going to be because we've only seen a picture of it that's been rendered. We don't see it compared to the PS5 Slim. But instead of having 1 line breaking up the side plates, there's 2 lines. It has an extra line in there to let you know that this is the Pro model console. Now, all the rage baiters out there are honing in on one key detail, and that's that this leak shows it having no disk drive. But if it's looking as much as it does like the PS5 Slim, I think it's pretty much a done deal that we're going to be able to install the disk drive that you can buy for the PS5 Slim if you buy the digital one, or they'll just ship another model of it with a disk drive and it'll be the same situation as the PS5 Slim. And honestly, this is good because in my next video for the weekend, we're going to talk about how the price leaked for the PS5 Slim. It's somewhere between $600 and $700, and I feel like this explains why there's 2 different numbers out there, because if they're going to sell it with both models like they are with the PS5 Slim, it stands to reason, obviously, that one of them is going to be cheaper, the one without a disk drive. I'm actually really curious about this as someone who owns both the launch PS5 and the PS5 Slim. Like, am I going to be able to take off the disk drive from my PS5 Slim and just pop it on the PS5 Pro? I honestly wouldn't mind saving the money on the Pro and just getting the digital one and then taking the disk drive off of my PS5, because once I get the Pro, the other PS5 I have, the Slim, is just going to be the backup console that I keep down here in my basement. So at that point, I really wouldn't mind just playing digital games on it. But for people who bought the PS5 Slim last year, if you bought the disc edition model, honestly, if you want to upgrade to the PS5 Pro, you could save some money and just get the digital one and just take the disc drive out of the PS5 Slim that you got last year and just pop it on the side. And I'm assuming that you'll at least save $50 on the console, which is most of the way to a game. So it might really be worth it for you. If you saw my video last November when I went out and bought the PS5 Slim the day it came out at GameStop here in Detroit, which was a crazy experience, I didn't like it before I got it, but once I took it out of the packaging and saw it next to the launch PS5, I was like, oh, this is actually a pretty good redesign. It shrinks it down enough, and it's something that I really would have liked to have at launch, like a console with that size profile, because at that time I was flying back and forth from Michigan and LA because I lived in LA, but I had this house and I was like spending months building it up and completely redoing it with my dad. So when I came back to Michigan to build up my house, I couldn't bring the PS5 because it was so damn big. It would have been so much better if I had a slimmer console that fit in a bag, unlike the original PS5 does. I've seen people bring it, like they put it in a suitcase of its own and then they take it out at security. I would never do that with the current PS5, like the launch one, just because it is so damn big. But I'm going to be honest, back when I was in LA and I was working for Austin Evans, we would always get a little Christmas break and I would always bring my PS4 because that thing fit in a bag perfectly. It was flat and slim. The PS5 is just a weird shape overall. The other update we got from the leaker, who's Bill Kuhn, he's leaked a ton of stuff. I'm pretty sure he leaked the design of the PS5 Slim as well, which is why I just wholeheartedly believe that this is the PS5 Pro. It's going to ship with the regular DualSense controller, and that might be a little bit of a trick as well, because we know that the only update between the DualSense and the DualSense V2 is that the V2 is going to have double the battery life, and that wouldn't change the chassis of the controller at all. So if you're just looking at the V2 compared to the V1, you really wouldn't notice a difference until you plugged it in, charged it up all the way, and realized that your controller could last more than one gaming session, which would be awesome. But you know, this is Sony we're talking about. This is a Sony that's far ahead of Xbox. They are basically the de facto winners of the console war. So if they want to include the original DualSense with this console and then release the DualSense V2 in January of next year, like we all thought was what they were going to do this year when that thing leaked on Best Buy, it's not something I would really put past them, right? Like at this point, if something's going to make Sony money, they're going to do that, as we've seen with the huge price increase that the PS5 just got in Japan, which brings it up over $91. Like Sony is being very cutthroat this generation about making money on the console, and they're willing to raise the price multiple times in a generation to make sure they do that. But yeah, the final update that we got from Bilbo Kun is that this thing is expected to be announced in mid-September. There's going to be a state of play in September. So hopefully, as we talk about later in the video, Sony just retires the showcase altogether and puts that work into making sure that the state of play is actually something worth watching. Like if they have a state of play that announces a bunch of first-party games and a new console, that immediately kind of gets rid of the stank that state of plays have at this point, because the last few have been so mediocre. There's really only one true standout state of play that was good, whereas the rest of them had one or two good games and like the rest was whatever. I mean, do you remember the one where they spent like 20 minutes showing off Suicide Squad and that caused the game to be delayed by over a year? That was crazy. Okay, so Facebook is one of those things that I used a lot in high school, and then when I got to college, I didn't use it as much, and then when I graduated college, I pretty much stopped using it altogether. But in my 30s, when I moved back here to Michigan and I started getting into working on my Jeep, Facebook has become an invaluable tool for finding new parts for it and lowballing out of people on cars that I'll never buy. It's an awesome experience being on Facebook Marketplace at the very least. And I am in a couple of groups. Like I love Shinola watches because I'm from Detroit and that's like a little Detroit thing that people care about. And my community has a local group and I love watching people complain in there. So I have a couple groups that I'm in on Facebook, and I've definitely seen some of these scam posts going up, and I'm sure you have if you're on Facebook as well. So essentially what these scams look like, and these are preying on like the worst possible aspect of being a person. And what they'll say is something like, oh, my son was driving home from college and unfortunately he got in a car accident that resulted in his death. I'm trying to get rid of his things and I'm just looking at this PS5 and I can no longer bear to have it. So if you want the PS5, respond to the post or DM me on Facebook and I will make sure you get it completely for free. So if you message these people, they will hit you back about the PlayStation 5 and then they'll say, hey, I'm happy to give you this PS5 for free. I'll FedEx ship it to you for 2-day shipping, but I just ask that you pay the cost of the shipping. And I can see at that point where people are kind of getting caught by it because they send through a fake auto-generated FedEx slip that just says provide payment info and it shows the address and the cost of sending and everything like that. So then when you agree to that offer, they'll then give you a Cash App link that goes to someone that doesn't have their name, and they'll ask for like 50 or 60 bucks to pay for the shipping. And then miraculously, if you send through that 50 or 60 bucks, you will never get your hands on a free PlayStation 5. I originally found out about this through the channel Pleasant Green, and he deep dove into this. I highly recommend checking out his video, and his channel overall is just really good. But essentially the reason you get a Cash App request from these people with a name that doesn't match the name of the person you're talking to is because the Cash App account is essentially a mule for someone in Nigeria who's running the scam. When you send that Cash App money, the person who gets the money here in America will take like 20 bucks out of the $50 and then they'll buy Bitcoin with the rest and then transfer the Bitcoin to the person in Nigeria who's running the scam. And it seems like a pretty decent way to make a little bit of money on the side if you have no morality or conscience. Like I'm sure with how many people that are on Facebook, especially older ones, I'm sure this goes through way more often than it doesn't, and I could see how that would build up a little bit of change. So what this Pleasant Green guy did is he created 2 accounts and he actually became one of these mules. Like he talked to someone on Telegram, got in on the system, set up his Cash App and made up a bunch of fake names. He worked with the person in Nigeria to create a fake PS5 post, and then he created a second Facebook account to actually message that person. And then when he got the money, which he never really got because it was him the whole time, he kind of ghosted the guy in Nigeria who ended up calling him. And then when he called the guy, he was like, do you feel bad about this at all? And he was like, no, I don't give a shit. Like I'm never going to get caught because of the way it's set up with the mules and the Bitcoin transfers and everything like like that. And the reason they're able to keep doing this is because there's other people out there who steal info from people, like pictures of their driver's licenses, pictures of their passports, pictures of their social security cards. So even if their Facebook account that's fake gets banned from some of these groups, they can just go on, I guess, the dark web and buy someone else's identity and create a brand new Facebook account so they can get past the verification check because they have a picture of photo ID that'll get them past the point where they're able to make that account. And all they have to do is make an account that matches the name on that form of identification, and it totally clears through Facebook's entire system. The biggest reason I'm talking about this, outside of the fact that it's just generally interesting to me as someone who's a PlayStation fan and really gets into this scam content on YouTube. I love watching people like Kit Boda and everything like that. I know a lot of you use Facebook. I talked to a few of you on there who message me through my account being semi-public. Like, you can't add me if I don't know you, but you can just message me. I talked to a few people who shop at Meijer here in Michigan. That's like nicer Walmart, essentially. It's like a 50-50 spot between Walmart and Costco. There's a great guy who loves using his Meijer points or M-Perks points to get free games, and I love seeing the hauls that he gets, so he sends me messages all the time. I also get messages from you guys asking about what my PlayStation Network ID is. It's Black Hills 99 if you want to add me. So I know that there are quite a few of you watching these videos that are on Facebook. So if you see one of these posts go up that says, hey, my kid died tragically coming home from college, I can no longer bear to look at his PlayStation 5, I want to give it away for free, just keep in mind that if things seem too good to be true, they almost always are, and do not fall for that scam. And I know it's just small amounts of money, like 50, 60 bucks, but you know, that's a little bit of a way to a PlayStation 5 for full price. That's basically a full game that you could buy, or a PlayStation Store credit card, or almost the cost of PlayStation Plus Essentials. So even though it's just 50 bucks, it's a lot of money, especially when you're essentially just throwing it down the drain. So if you see one of these posts, do not fall for them. Be aware, do not fall for any scams promising to give away free PS5s, because if there was a foolproof way to get a free PS5, you bet your ass you'd be hearing about it on this channel. I want you guys to save money. I don't want you blowing all your cash on games and consoles. Like, I'm cheap, I'm frugal, I love getting a deal, but yeah, free stuff is almost always not free. There's always a cost and always a consequence. So unless you hear about a way to get a free PS5 here on this channel, you could bet your ass that you're not getting a free PS5 from some way that you didn't hear about on this channel. Anyway, that brings us to the second news story here in the video today, which is that Jim Ryan, despite his negative leaning legacy at PlayStation, was definitely right about one thing, and that is that lower spec consoles are not good for the gaming industry. He said, one thing that can be said is that if you look at the history of the game business, creating a special low-priced, reduced spec console is something that has had not great results in the past. We've considered that option and have seen other executives who have attempted this discover how problematic it is. So the one example of them doing this that I can think of where something actually made it to market was the PlayStation TV. This thing, if you don't know about it, which I'm sure you don't because they didn't market it and it wasn't even on the market for more than a year or so, essentially what it was like a little playing card size PlayStation Puck that had an Ethernet port, a power port, an SD card slot, or a Vita memory card slot, and an HDMI port, and it came along with the DualShock 3, and what it did was put the Vita operating system on your TV, so you could use apps like Netflix or whatever ones actually ended up coming out for Vita, and you could play some Vita games and most of the PSP games that were available on the PlayStation Store on that console. They put this thing out there, no one wanted it. No one wanted the Vita, no one wanted the PlayStation TV. Nintendo, on the other hand, has done this a bunch throughout history. The most notable example is that black and red Nintendo Wii they put out right at the end of the Wii generation, which honestly looked really cool, but it removed the GameCube port, so you couldn't plug in GameCube controllers or read GameCube discs, and it removed the internet. So the very few games that were patchable over the internet on the Wii, those were not patchable. You had to like call in a Nintendo, get your save copy fixed by Nintendo, and then they'd send back your memory card or whatever, and then the save would work. And if you wanted to use WiiWare or any of the other downloadable games like from the Virtual Console or anything like that, you were SOL. So there have been quite a few different cheap version consoles out there, but none of them have been as high profile as the Xbox Series S, which is exactly what he was talking about, because Microsoft put a lot of rules in place this generation with the Series S that detrimentally hurt the games industry overall. The main one being that if you want to ship a game on Xbox, they have a hard set rule that you can't have features missing from a game on Series S that is in the same game on Xbox Series X. They definitely bent that rule eventually with Baldur's Gate 3, but that was almost 3 years years into the generation. So most, if not all, of the games that have come out during this generation have had to have an Xbox Series S version ready to go, because you can't support one console and not the other. It's not just features. You can't release a game that only works on the Series X and leaves the Series S in the dust, which is a bad thing. So some developers over the past few years have spoken out about this. Some of them say that it's holding things back because you're basically having to make sure that even if it's not called an Xbox One game, when you release it, you have an Xbox One spec of your game ready to go. So obviously, if you have to release a game on both the Series S and X, it might cause you to strip out features or different graphic settings, or, you know, anything that would actually advance games forward instead of just being better looking ports of PlayStation 4 games. So that's bad. Other developers have said that it's surprisingly powerful, and they're honestly shocked at how well it's able to run these games, but the vast majority of them have been hinting that it is holding things back, and we've never gotten a more clear-cut developer talking out than we have today. So there's a guy named Del Walker, who I'm sure you've seen on Twitter. He's worked at Naughty Dog, he's worked at Rockstar, and one thing I really like about his account is that he talks pretty openly about the development experience of a lot of games, so you kind of get an inside scoop into the stuff that they don't really ever talk about, and this time he was targeting the Xbox Series S. And this was all spurred on by Black Myth Wukong, which of course is available on PlayStation but not on Xbox. It turns out that's mainly because it didn't pass Xbox's certification, because the game just doesn't run all that well. It has a lot of performance problems the deeper you get into the game, but still, they're missing out on arguably the biggest game of 2024. And what Dell had to say about this is, "I wish the Series S never existed, man. So annoying to optimize for that console. I expect we'll unfortunately see more game launches get skipped by Xbox in the future." And if you're scared about that, you have a reason to be, because even today, when I'm recording this video, in Nintendo's Nintendo Direct, Capcom announced a collection of Street Fighter games, and it's coming to every console except Xbox. And just a few months ago, when they announced the remastered versions of Marvel vs. Capcom, it's not coming to Xbox. And there are plenty of other examples of games that are just skipping Xbox, and I think it really comes down to the fact that developers just don't want to develop for the Xbox Series S. Now, Xbox has a big reason to actually support the Series S, because that's the better selling console for them. More people are buying Series S's than Series X's because, you know, it's $350, it's a good Game Pass machine. But when you have that many out in the wild and you don't have that many console sales to begin with, you kind of got to support your audience where they're at. And unfortunately for Microsoft, they're all on the Xbox Series S. Not all of them, but for the most part. So while we can complain a lot about the Jim Ryan era, and I think there is a lot to complain about, mainly the live service push and just the anti-consumer sort of stuff Sony's done this generation. I mean, that live service push did not pay off at all. Look at how, you know, Concord is doing, and then we didn't even get the Last of Us online multiplayer game, which would have been awesome. And, you know, Helldivers 2, the one live service hit they had no expectations for that game, and it wasn't even part of this 8 live service games by 2025 pitch that Jim Ryan had back towards the beginning of the PS5 generation. So yeah, there is a lot to criticize him for, but obviously with 4 years of hindsight in mind, he was definitely right about the Series S holding things back and eventually becoming a big thorn in Xbox's side. Anyway, that brings us to the third and last news story here, which is that we're just being set up for disappointment again. When will Sony learn, guys? But you know, we're all expecting a big showcase by the end of this year. There is mounting evidence leading up to this, because in the past, if Sony didn't do a showcase in May, they definitely did it in September, and we just expected, because we got a state of play around May or June this year, that we would get a showcase later in the year around August or September. And it made a lot of sense, because Sony obviously has a lot of games to show off. But Jeff Grubb is putting it out there that whatever we get towards the end of September will not be a showcase, but it will be a state of play. Now, I don't want to put too much stock in him or really any other leaker, because there have been times where all of these people have been wrong in the past, and I just can't believe Sony would be not smart enough to actually do a showcase when they couldn't need one more. Like, they have a ton of games to announce, stuff from Sucker Punch, stuff from Naughty Dog, stuff from Santa Monica Studio. All of that stuff needs to be announced, so it makes sense to do it in a showcase. And on top of that, they also have a big piece of hardware coming out this year with the PS5 Pro, so it would just make sense for them to do a big blowout showcase towards the end of September to kind of lead them into the holiday cycle of gaming. But if he's to be believed and the state of play is what we get, I could kind of see a future where the showcase just kind of goes away completely and Sony actually does some work to make sure that these state of plays are actually something worth watching. The last few were not great. I mean, they had some good games there. They had some stuff that was like fun to look forward to, but at the end of the day, people want to hear about what first party stuff is coming in the future. And if you're just doing a state of play with a bunch of third party stuff, stuff and anime games and stuff like that, obviously it's not going to do a lot to get people hyped about owning a PlayStation 5. But if they do announce this as a state of play and it lasts longer than an hour and they start announcing some first party stuff and don't just have it where it's a bunch of third party stuff no one cares about and then one big first party game at the end, I could see the state of play kind of redeeming its terrible reputation and becoming the de facto new showcase for PlayStation instead of just calling it a showcase. But yeah, none of this is concrete. I will be extremely disappointed if it is a state of play up until after that state of play if it turns out being good, because you know the track record of state of plays has just not been very good. There was one really good one that had like Resident Evil 4 and a bunch of other great Capcom stuff, but outside of that they have been largely mediocre to terrible. But yeah guys, that's all I've got for you in today's video. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching and shape on.